Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today we continue with the compilation videos which are aimed at people who are working or people who are driving or people who just have a heck of a lot of time and want something on in the background. Today we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Our first story today comes to us from Ancient Educator 76. You need to be communicating more clearly with your parents. I don't want to see this kid in my office until you've done so. Time for some teacher double malicious compliance. Let's jump right in. This happened at the height of the TikTok challenge, but the fruition of malicious compliance has finally reared its beautiful head. So back when soap dispensers the world over were on high alert due to students stealing them or destroying them in the process, the teachers at my school were directed to monitor the bathrooms. First off, I think that this is a disgusting practice, especially when our admin says, you need to go inside that restroom and get them out of there. Effing gross. We have a security guard for that, and even an SRO. But nope, it's on us now. Add it to the ever-increasing pile of things I never thought I'd have to do as a teacher. The boys' upstairs restroom is directly across the hall from my room. Joel Embiid could spread his arms and touch both the door to my room and this bathroom simultaneously with his palms. I hear a sound, a very distinct sound that, thanks to TikTok, I've been required to learn to listen for. The loud snapping of the back of a soap dispenser that someone is trying to pry off the wall. It's very distinct, and I heard it well from my classroom door just as I was about to prop it open mid-class. I open the restroom door and walk inside while my body holds the door open. I see three boys. One is doing a stupid dance while rotating in a circle in place. One is standing on a toilet inside a stall, phone up and open and recording, presumably, and one staring at the mirror. The first two boys see me and change their behavior. One student doesn't seem to see me and reaches forward with his fingers clawed open, prying at the back of the soap dispenser. This happened multiple times in the span of about 2 seconds, and it was clear what he was doing. I finally couldn't take how long it has been since I've had this door open and cleared my throat. He looks at me, pretends to have only been washing his hands the whole time, and stands there. I tell them they need to move along. Two boys listen. Dispenser boy decides to make this a point of contention, saying, "No, I don't think I will." It's at this point I decide to be out and report what he's doing to the admin. If this was today I effed up, this would have been F up number 1. I tell EJ, a great security guy who can't be everywhere at once, you know, displacement theory, what's going on, and he gets dispenser boy, dweeb, out of the restroom and sends him to the office. Upon request, I email admin exactly what happened, in about as much painful detail as the aforementioned paragraphs would indicate. And this should be it, right? Nope. Dad doesn't believe his precious little dweeb could or would do something like this, and he pressed the issue because dweeb was 100% denying. Middle school kid denying something? Nah, doesn't sound like a middle schooler. I will say I have the utmost respect for kids and excuse their behavior before adults. Adults should know better. But this began wasting a lot of my time. All of a sudden, I'm now required to sit down alongside administration just to have a makeshift conference call with the dweeb's dad. I already emailed the details, spoke on the phone with admin about this, then in person to confirm it, accompanied by my standing exactly where and how the student stood, how they attempted to remove the soap dispenser, etc. I had to mime this because the dad didn't believe that this is what his son was doing. So why the flip am I meeting? What's there to discuss? Oh, the father doesn't believe his son would do something like this, and due process and all that. Due process doesn't mean that you get to demand my presence like some sort of underpaid genie. Like I have to perform and reenact the scenario in a convincing enough way so dad will finally believe it. Yet here I was, sitting in my admin's office while she dialed the father's number on speakerphone. Here's what she said. "Hi, Mr. Asfart. This is Mrs. Bibble from Floppy Middle School. I'm here with OP, and he has confirmed that your child was definitely attempting to remove the soap dispenser, and not just trying to get soap. I understand how this could be a misunderstanding." She said some more typical admin things, but then turned to me, her face changing from hard to interpret to very easy to interpret, and said, "You really need to start communicating clearly with your parents. I don't want to see any kid in my office until after you've done so. This could have been easy if you had done this." I see your point, and see why I needed to be chided. That's probably what my face said. But deep down, I was shocked. I have no idea how I could have prevented an issue with his parent. I did everything according to protocol. I had EJ pull the tape to confirm times, all that jazz. I thought she was going to be apologetic about the situation, saying, "I'm sorry, I know your word means something, and you saw this firsthand, and I even have a statement from another student that was there, saying that he was trying to take it down." She did. "So I shouldn't have called you here on your prep just so Dweeb's dad could talk to you and ask you himself." You know, something like that. I decided right then that I was going to have a malicious compliance moment, just wasn't sure when. I had forgotten about this for months. Now, then all of a sudden, I get my opportunity. Good old Dweeb is at it again, this time throwing things at a female student running away from him in the hall, ending with him slapping her in the behind and then groping it. Imagine him making a duckbill with his hand. It was like that. She was not a willing participant in this. Enter malicious compliance. I remember what admin said about sending a very clear email to parents, and to do so before I send the kid to the office. So I have Dweeb wait in the hall rather than send him down, then ask my colleague to stand in the hallway to monitor so I can stop my class's instruction to write an email to a parent. I needed to send an email first, right? Here's the email. Team B. I always use team and last name. I was at my popped open classroom door, ready to close it as 7th grade lunch students passed, when I saw Dweeb chasing a female student through the halls, eventually hitting her on the backside. By backside, I mean a very inappropriate location to hit someone. He also used a grabbing or pinching motion to grasp her backside as well. Right around this time, Officer Platinum popped his head into my class, asking, "What's up with this guy?" I told him, and he said, "No need to call the office, I'll handle it from here." I continued my email. I had intended on sending Dweeb to the office, but was instructed to be more clear in my communication. So I wanted to send this email before sending him down, also a requirement I've been advised to adhere to after our last communication. Our school resource officer happened to swing by, so it appears that the office visit may not be happening just yet. If there is anything you need, don't hesitate to ask or reply to this email. OP. I lost the train of what happened after this. I immediately returned to teaching after Officer took Dweeb off my hands. But I know videotape was used, interviews with many students were used, and Dweeb won't be on campus the rest of the school year. I'm not sure if he officially got arrested, but everybody was talking about how Dweeb left in a cop car. Now, right at the end of the story, OP referred to Dweeb as DB, and I read it as Dweeb because that's what they've been called through the whole story. But I said in my head, douchebag. And OP actually commented on this down below. He said, "Love this, could also be diaper baby, disappointing bampot, dowdy bumble, and a potty mouth version, damn bastard." Do me a quick favor and take a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're actually not subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. This next story comes to us from Happy Giraffe. Cameras have to be on no matter what. Fine by me. Don't mind the pump. Let's jump right in. I am a project manager and data scientist. I manage lots of different public health related projects. There is one project in particular that includes a really demanding team from a federal government department. I recently returned back to work from maternity leave. I work in my office 3 days a week. On those days, I have to pump breast milk at regular intervals for my baby. Luckily, I have my own private office and can usually just keep on working, emails, reports, etc. while I pump. I have a hands-free wearable pump which is convenient, but still definitely obvious if I am wearing it. It pokes out about my shirt and is not exactly silent. Recently, we have a Zoom call scheduled during one of the times I needed to pump. Instead of missing the meeting, I figured I would just keep my camera off so I could wear my pump and still participate and listen. Heck, I was even in my office and not working from home. I felt like I was being a pretty committed employee. Meeting starts, a few people have their cameras off. The lead makes the announcement. I just want to remind everyone that our expectation is that you will have your cameras on because this is not a virtual meeting. It's a simulated in-person meeting, whatever that means. I sent a quick private message to explain I was paying attention, but pumping. No response to me, just instead again, the expectation is that all cameras will be on. So, fine. I turned my camera on for this meeting of about 20 people. The camera isn't aimed at my chest, but certainly the top of my pump is clearly visible. I unmuted myself so you could also clearly hear the pump and just said, "Thank you for your patience, I was adjusting my breast pump." The meeting continued awkwardly, with several other team managers letting me know privately it was fine to turn my camera off. But at that point, there really was no point in turning it off. At the most recent meeting, the announcement was, "Please turn on your cameras if you are comfortable doing so." Does anybody else here wonder if that lead was crapping their pants for the next week, expecting a call or an email or even an in-person meeting with HR? OP really could have made a stink about that, even though they already got back at them for just being there on camera while still pumping. This next story comes to us from FMintar1. Kavina Karen wants to use the shoulder lane to escape traffic. I dared her. Let's jump right in. This happened just a few hours ago. I was driving a semi on a highway when the traffic suddenly became bumper to bumper on a 2-lane due to an accident a couple miles ahead. Everybody was creeping and I was in the right lane. Suddenly, I saw a regular vehicle, not even an emergency vehicle, on my right side, shoulder lane, passing me. There's not even an exit nearby. I was like, hell to the no. And as soon as I saw a couple vehicles behind me trying to do the same thing, I immediately blocked them by going slightly to the shoulder so I'm occupying 2 lanes. I got a few honks, but I couldn't care less. If I'm suffering in a traffic jam, everyone should as well. Shoulder isn't for passing. As long as I didn't see any flashing lights behind me, I'm not opening that shoulder. We're crawling anyway. After a few hundred feet ahead, I saw an idle police cruiser on the shoulder up ahead. Figured that nobody would dare using the shoulder anymore. I merged back to my lane. Turns out I was right. The shoulder became empty all of a sudden. But that's not the end. While I was chilling, still creeping, I heard a very annoying and repetitive honk on my left side. I looked and saw this lady with huge sunglasses, ponytail, bending down on her seat, looking at me, yelling something, looking outraged. I rolled down and this is the following conversation. "You know you're blocking 2 lanes, right? Huh? I was behind you on the right lane and you wouldn't move. I honked and you didn't care. That's a shoulder. You're not supposed to drive on the shoulder. That's a lane. You are allowed to drive there." While she's still yelling incoherently, we are still slowly moving. Then I remembered, there's an idle police cruiser on the shoulder that I saw a while back that we didn't pass yet. I'm sure everyone knows by now, malicious compliance initiated. I reduced my speed even more, so Karen is faster than me by a little bit on the left lane. Then, I dared her by giving her the signal that she can pass me to use the shoulder. She aggressively took it, cut in front of me, and immediately went to the shoulder. However, what Karen didn't know was that the cruiser is already around the corner. I was driving a semi, so my field of vision is much higher and wider than everyone else. Karen was driving a sedan. Her field of vision is much lower and limited. What I didn't take account was how aggressively Karen was driving. She cut the corner so quick without looking and ended up hitting the cruiser. Sorry, Ossifer. It was so abrupt that I can hear the crash pretty loudly. I can also tell that the driver in front of me was gasping in shock as well. I have never seen an officer get out of the cruiser so fast before. This dude practically jumped out of the cruiser in less than 1 second. Then, this is what I witnessed and heard when I'm creeping slowly with the traffic. Not wanting to miss anything, I rolled down my passenger window. "Get out of the vehicle!" Karen still inside the car, full fluster mode. "Get out now!" Karen finally gets out, and literally word per word, "But I wasn't at fault. You were stopping on a lane. This is a shoulder for emergency, not for your convenience to escape traffic jams." But incoherent sob story as I drove away from the scene. I couldn't hear what's going on anymore, but I kept watching my front as well as the side mirror. Judging from her body movement, she was indeed panicking while pointing at my truck. Don't know why. Then, before the scene disappeared from my mirror, the last thing I saw was the officer pulled out his handcuffs and cuffed Karen. Surprisingly, she complied without causing any more scenes. Then, I continued to drive into the sunset. There was a comment down below this story that actually summarizes exactly how I feel about driving these days. It comes from the user Shape of Things, and it says, "I used to get so annoyed at the way people drive. Then I realized one day that the person getting the most stressed about it is me. I would block them, beep, be cut off and sworn at. So I stopped. They drive like idiots, it's on them. They cut lanes, drive on the inside, drive like lunatics to get wherever they are going 20 seconds earlier. It's on them. I drive for me, to keep me safe and to get me to wherever I'm going by the time I arrive. So they break all the rules to get ahead by milliseconds. It's not my problem. I will still get to where I'm going in due course. It's just now I get there more relaxed and chilled out, and knowing I have driven safer and not taken any unnecessary risks. Life is too short. Let idiots be idiots. Don't own it." This next story comes to us from Secret Northern, Insist on ordering food despite having the wrong number? Fine by me. Let's jump right in. This happened when I still lived with my parents over 20 years ago in a small town just outside a small city. As a teenager with a bit of social anxiety, I would spend most Friday and Saturday nights at home watching movies, playing Lego, or computer games. Often my parents would go out into the city as there was nothing to do in the town, so I would be home alone until late at night. Our landline phone number was very similar to that of the local Chinese takeaway and taxi company. I won't give the exact numbers, but to give an idea, our house was 122222, the Chinese takeaway was 122221, and the taxi firm was 122122. So in a Friday-Saturday night drunken state, it was very easy to misdial. 99% of callers would apologize once advised they had the wrong number, and I would even be able to tell them the correct number to dial. The 1%, however, the instance that I recall and fits this sub goes as follows. "Hello? Hi, I'd like to order 1 sweet and sour, 1 chow mein." I interrupted. "I'm sorry, this is the wrong number." "No, this is the Chinese," although they used a common racist term, often used back in the far from politically correct 90s northeastern ex-mining villages. "I'm sorry, it really isn't. You need to call 12... Caller interrupted. "Yes, it is, so take my order now." Quite rude and forceful. "Fine, what do you want?" Caller gives the order. "Okay, are you collecting or want this delivered?" "Delivered, and quickly." "Okay, it'll be about 30 minutes. Hangs up. 45 minutes later, the phone rings. I answer, and there is one hangry customer on the phone. "I'm sorry, you didn't leave your address for delivery, and 1471 didn't work. UK readers will know this, but it's basically a service to call back your last received caller. So we waited for you to call back. Food will be another 30 minutes, ask for the address, and hang up." 45 minutes later, another hangry call received. Only this time, they were a little drunker and ruder. I fess up that I've been stringing them along, but they insisted that I was a Chinese takeaway and ordered me to take their order again. Unfortunately, at this point, the restaurant was now closed, so I guess they went to bed without their food. They never called back, so hopefully they learned a lesson too. On the subject of wrong numbers, not quite related to the story, but something from my past working in a call center, somebody managed to edit one of our transfer numbers. I can't remember what department it was for, but it was one that we transferred people to frequently. And when you tried to transfer people to this edited number, which was an automated process by clicking on something on the computer, it would send them to an adult hotline. I was completely amazed at the time because it took them over 48 hours to change it on the system, although they did tell us after the first day to stop transferring people to that number. This next story comes to us from Catastrophe. Hearing aids are not equal to earbuds. Let's jump right in. This happened a few years ago, around the time I was 17. I had just started working at a smallish cafe run by a well-known family in our area. I knew some people who had worked there before, and they told me for the most part, the owners were great, very chill and laid back when it was slow, and normally weren't bad about breathing down the employees' necks. Their oldest daughter, who also helped run everything, was the only one who was very peculiar, and we'll call her Karen. I am officially diagnosed with a hearing deficiency, not enough to be considered deaf, but more than hard of hearing, so I wear hearing aids. My first day before we opened, my coworkers asked me if they could do anything else to help me out, and we eventually started talking about the hearing aids in general. While talking about everything, I mentioned they had Bluetooth capabilities, so I could play music through them. Not that I would, but I could. Karen had been in the room at the time and said, "You can't wear those, no earbud policy," and tapped on the policies paper on the wall. I protested, explaining they're hearing aids and not earbuds, and that I wouldn't be using them to listen to any music while I was working. Her reasoning was I didn't need them because I wasn't considered fully deaf, and I was doing this to get around the no earbud policy, directly quoting when I said they could play music. I can't wear them? Okay, let's see how this goes. Placed them into the case in my bag and started my shift. I couldn't understand my trainer, couldn't hear the customers, couldn't hear when orders were called to be sent out. Things were going extremely slow. A couple of warmed pastries burnt since I wasn't able to hear the timers. Simple sentences had to be repeated multiple times, with people basically yelling at me just for me to be able to piece a few words together. I guess the cherry on top was me ignoring one of the owners when she tried speaking to me. Karen came up to me and tried addressing me about it until she finally realized what was going on after she had repeated herself 5 times. By the end of that shift, I was allowed to wear my hearing aids, no questions asked. Gotta be honest, if I was in that situation, I probably wouldn't tell anybody that they had Bluetooth capabilities because that could just be my little secret. At any time, I could be listening to nice and quiet music, not loud enough that I wouldn't be able to hear anything else going on around me, but it would make the day go by a heck of a lot faster. This next story comes to us from Weir Cho. Won't replace a brand new broken lawnmower, but will let me return and reorder? Okay, let's jump right in. So I bought a riding lawnmower a few years ago from a big home store. I paid for delivery, and upon said delivery, it didn't start. The delivery truck had left by the time I had gotten gas in it, and figured this out, so I called the store. I explained that my brand new just delivered today lawnmower was not starting, and immediately the person on the phone asked me if I purchased the extended warranty. I hadn't, so they told me it would cost $100 to have them come get the lawnmower, and then however much more the repairs were. Mind you, this was brand freaking new. In my mind, they should bring me a new one to replace the one that didn't work upon delivery. No matter how much I argued, this worker was sticking to their story. I quickly changed my tactic and asked what the return policy was. As long as a return was initiated within 30 days, I could have a full refund, including the cost of delivery, and the store would come pick up the mower for me at no additional cost. So I pointed out that the store wouldn't replace my non-working item by taking one trip to my house to pick up the non-working one and bring me one that worked, and instead would make 2 trips to pick up the one that didn't work and then bring me the new one I purchased the second time as a totally different transaction. The worker said yes, and when I tried to point out how that made no sense, he didn't want to hear it. So right then and there, I initiated a refund. I then immediately ordered a new one and had him set up the delivery date. After that date was set, we had to schedule the date for pickup of the old mower, and I made myself unavailable for any date other than the delivery date for the new one. So even though he had insisted they wouldn't just bring me a replacement mower and pick up the first one, they were now doing just that, but with the additional paperwork of processing a return and additional paperwork for delivery of the new mower. The manager called me later that day to apologize for the hassle, and they ended up waiving my delivery fee. In all honesty, that person you talked to on the phone probably knew that their whole policy was BS, but there was nothing they could do about it, and they spend their whole day talking to people who have a problem with that policy, and they know that they can't do anything to change it. One thing they could have done to make that situation better, though, is just to simply admit, yes, I know it's silly, but that's how our system works, so it's the way we have to do it. This next story comes to us from Neville's Rememberall. Only want men to make your meal? Fine by me. Let's jump right in. I worked as a cook and carryout for an Italian restaurant for several years. Normally, I would work in the kitchen during the week and carry out on the weekends. My forte was cook. I was fast, detail-oriented, and prided myself on making the perfect dish. In the 5+ years I worked there, I was the only female ever in the kitchen. On Tuesdays, I was always in the kitchen and another worker, Eric, worked carryout. Every Tuesday, a customer would come in and order the same thing. The order was very specific and went against how meals are typically prepared. Things like they only wanted 2 meatballs instead of the standard 3. The meatballs must be separate from the spaghetti in an aluminum dish, not a styrofoam cup. A small scoop of sauce on the meatballs, etc. The meal was so specific, I knew it by heart and always made it. The cheapskate owner of the restaurant would have been pissed if he knew how much styrofoam and aluminum tins I had to use to make the order by splitting all the food out, but I didn't mind. Well, one day Eric decided to switch to serving in the main dining room to make more money. The first Tuesday he switched, the managers didn't have anyone for carryout, so they asked me to cover. As I was working that night in carryout, an old man in a black bowler hat and tan trench coat comes in the lobby. I greet him and am about to take his order when he states, "Are there any men working today? Where's Eric?" I was confused but went and fetched Eric and Eric took his order. I asked Eric if he was related and he said, "No, he just feels women are incompetent and can't make his order right." I was fuming. When the order was ready, I picked it up and realized it was the specific order that comes in every Tuesday. This old man must have assumed only men work in the kitchen. Little did he know he had just come face to face with the 5-foot, 100-pound female that had perfectly made his order every Tuesday for years. I handed him his order without a word. I was so angry by his sexism that I didn't want to speak and say something that would make me lose my job. I regret not saying anything to this day. He inspected his order and rolled his eyes when he spied the meatballs in styrofoam instead of an aluminum dish, but left without a word. After that, I decided if he wanted men to handle his stupid order, then I'll go with it. I got approval from the manager to proceed with my plan, and male coworkers jumped in to help. I asked Eric to not help him anymore since he was familiar with the old man's order. Besides, he needed to focus on serving anyways. Only other men took his order. I asked the male cooks to make his meal. I didn't tell the special instructions. No more special treatment with separate tins. He got the standard spaghetti and meatballs like everyone else. It would be what the male cheapskate owner would want after all. And no special discount codes that would credit him 50 cents for one less meatball. Only Eric and I knew the discount codes during that shift anyway. Well, every week his order was, according to him, wrong. He started to demand the order be remade per his requirements. He would be denied his requests, citing the cheapskate owner was cracking down on product waste. He got even more upset when he discovered he wasn't getting the discount codes anymore. After several Tuesdays of this charade, he finally asked to speak to a manager to voice his dissatisfaction. He asked, "Where is the man that was making my meal?" And the manager responded, "Oh, she quit." Looking back, I should have instead popped up around the corner and said something like, "I am no man," a la Lord of the Rings or something, but that was the best response we thought of at the time. Unfortunately, he didn't have an epiphany or realization that I hoped for. The manager just said he scoffed and took his food and left. He quit coming a couple weeks later, never heard from him again. Should have been more respectful to the female cook. Does anybody else get the vibe that this guy would be the kind of person who would say, "Well, I only want men working on my order when I'm at your restaurant," but then they'd go back home and when their wife is making dinner, they wouldn't take part in it at all? Yeah, there's still some people from that generation around, but as those generations pass on, Fortunately, the world is changing for the better. This next story comes to us from Aubergine. This is the price now. Let's jump right in. So I'm not sure how malicious this is, but I thought it might be quite fun to post. I used to work in a Cath Kidston shop in London, which for those that don't know the brand, CK is very floral vibes, bags, accessories, and very classically British style. When I moved to London, I joined a CK store from a different one, having already been a supervisor. This was a busier shop though, so I started at sales assistant until the following year I was a supervisor again. The day in question was a Sunday, and I was the only manager on shift. A woman came in with a steep sense of purpose radiating off of her. She came to the till and laid down a quite frankly manky child's backpack. CK does these quite cute child-sized backpacks in all sorts of patterns like flowers, dinosaurs, anything. This one had looked into the abyss and stared back. It was so discolored. There was also some brown stuff scraped along the sides as well, which was delightful. The woman proceeds to tell me that the bag is broken, and she wrongly assumes I'm going to be extremely happy to help her. Even I cannot work miracles and return a bag which is definitely a few years old. It roughly goes like this. I'm sorry, this is quite an old pattern, so I won't be able to do a return or exchange for you today. But I just bought this a few months ago. It shouldn't have broken already. It's quite possible you bought this at an outlet store, in which case you need to go to an outlet store to return, as the prices would not match. No, I bought this at full price. It was £30. I'm sure this pattern is from 2014 or so it would not have been in store recently. No, I need a refund or exchange. I bought it very recently. Do you have a receipt for a refund? No, I bought it recently, but I don't keep receipts. Can't you just take my word for it? I cannot process a refund without a receipt, unfortunately. It's policy. At this point, I realize this bag is going to come out to pennies if I find the code for it somewhere inside. But without a receipt, I can offer you an exchange or a gift card. Why didn't you say that earlier? Okay, well, for an exchange that you say is broken, I need to take the bag and record it as faulty. Wait, you're taking it? If it is faulty, it needs to go to the warehouse and be looked at. And I can find the product code to find out how much money you can get for your exchange. Well, okay, if this gets me an exchange, you can take it. At this point, I gingerly take this bag that is literally disgusting and open it up to try and find a SKU code on the label. This is the only way to get an accurate record of what the bag is when there is no receipt. Luckily, this bag had a SKU code, and by the first number, I already knew it was an old bag. I type in the SKU into the till, and this bag comes in at a whopping £5. She literally does not believe me that it is only £5. She walks around to my side and looks at me typing it in. She looks at the bag to read the numbers and tells me I can't read numbers. I type it in at least 20 times, and each time it comes out at £5. The lady literally stands there debating with me for another 5 minutes about the price. She is clearly fuming it's only £5, and is trying to figure out whether she wants to even do the exchange. She ends up buying 2 packets of hair clips and complains to me that this will make her daughter cry. I say thank you so much for coming, and then proceed to show everyone I work with the backpack covered in poo. I got to thinking on this one. I think this person probably had their kid come home from school, realized that their bag was covered in poop, and didn't want to deal with it, so they just said, well, I'm gonna take it back to the store and make it their problem. I have huge respect for everybody who works in retail when they have to put up with people like this on a regular basis. This next story comes to us from Bald Goddess. Eye doctor. Let's jump right in. I've been wearing glasses since I was 9 years old, nearsighted, and my eyesight deteriorated pretty steadily until my late teens. When I was 13, I went to see a new eye doctor who opened up shop in the same medical center as the dentist my mom worked for. When I was asked by the eye doctor to read the eye chart without my glasses, I told him that I couldn't see anything other than the top 2 lines. Everything else was gray blurs, which was true. He told me to just try the 3rd line. So I took a breath and guessed every single letter. He turned on the lights and said I had done pretty good for a girl. Now, I don't know how he was expecting me to react with that comment, but I have always had a tendency to give people who have made me angry the bare minimum they ask for. If you don't specifically tell me to do something, you are not going to get the results you are wanting. And that is what happened next. For everyone who has ever had to have eye exams for corrective lenses, I am sure you are familiar with the test where you are given the same image in front of each eye, and you are supposed to tell the eye doctor when the two images merge. Well, he told me to let him know when the images merged, and then he started turning dials to make the images come closer together. I sat there seething, watching the images come closer together before they disappeared rather than merge. I never told him when they disappeared. I mean, he specifically said to tell him when the two images became one, and I am just a teenage girl, so who am I to know that the images won't magically reappear and become one image, right? After several minutes of him clicking dials with no response from me, the doctor stopped and asked me if the images had come together yet. I very innocently asked him, "What images?" The images were gone. He got very exasperated and asked me what I meant the images were gone. I told him the images had disappeared before they became one image. I can still hear the sigh he made when I remembered this event. He reset everything and told me to tell him the minute the images disappeared. I complied, and afterwards, when I was walking out of the eye doctor's office with my mom and a referral to a specialist, my mom asked me what happened because the eye doctor had made some comments to her about my attitude. I told her what happened and she was not happy. However, since he was a friend of her boss, she couldn't complain directly to him. So she decided to not take me back, but instead congratulated me for how I handled the situation. Okay, how do we get from reading a chart to that's pretty good for a girl? What? Do only penises have eyes now? I did think of something funny after this one if I ever had to go to the optometrist and get my eyes checked. I'd get somebody I know to go in for a free eye exam first and take a picture of the eye chart for me so that I could memorize it before I go in. And then when they ask me to read the chart, I'd keep on going down the chart and even read the little copyright information at the bottom just to see the stunned look on the optometrist's face. This next story comes to us from Punk Tyrantosaurus. Fire me because I did my job? Okay. Hope you don't need all of these supplies. Let's jump right in. I love taking photos of people, to the point that I have 2 resumes for applying for jobs, and one of them is specifically for photography work. So I was psyched when I got a job in a photo studio. It was a chain and it wasn't like high quality work, but it was still awesome. I took a lot of photos of very cute babies in particular. Well, the company had a 3-strike policy. Once there were 3 issues with you, you were gone. They made you sign off on every single one of the reports. It didn't matter how much later it was that you got your next strike, they never went away. Okay, doesn't seem like a great business model, but okay. And being fair, I did get 2 strikes, which were very reasonable. One day I missed work because I forgot to set an alarm. It was a super irregular schedule and it wasn't always easy to keep track of. The next strike happened because I scheduled a photo shoot for before the beginning of a shift accidentally. The program was supposed to only show you times that an employee would be available for doing photo shoots, and they changed our hours with very little warning. So the photo shoot that I had scheduled the week before that would have been within our hours was no longer. I felt super bad for the mom and daughter who came in early for their photos and helped them sort everything out with a free photo redemption in apology. I still got my second strike for that. Now, the last strike. I actually got 2 on the same day. Around Christmas, our store goes nuts. We have to have twice as many people working in order to keep everything in order. During that, I was training a new employee and helping with her photo shoots and my own, and running cash and taking passport photos and teaching her the rules for them, and. It was a nightmare. What made it worse was that one customer submitted 2 complaints that day about me. See, this customer felt I was pushing her to buy photos. Literally all this company cares about is pushing the photo packages, and I was instructed relentlessly to do it more and with more energy because I didn't make enough people feel they had to have them. So great. I convinced a customer to spend money instead of just giving them free things and not getting $1 from them, like the company was always yelling at me to do. And I got a complaint for that. Great. And then the other complaint was even more ludicrous. The customer felt I was being too bossy with the other photographer. The one that I was training. The one that didn't know how to do the job yet, so I had to tell her how to do things. Apparently, I deserve to be fired for telling her how to do things. I was heartbroken. It's been a few years now, so I've gotten over it, but I was so happy working as a photographer. But here's where the malicious compliance finally kicks in. See, by my nature, I end up doing a lot of work that isn't actually my job because I want to help. I enjoy feeling useful, but they're firing me because they don't want me to sell things or train people like they had told me to do. So for the last 2 weeks of my job, I stopped counting all of the money for deposits. That was the manager's job, even though she hadn't done it in half a year since making me do it. This meant she had to come in on days that she didn't work just to do the deposit. I stopped actively recruiting customers, which is what you're supposed to do in your downtime. Cold call previous customers and prowl around the attached mall for people you can convince to get photos. The best tactic was always to find people with new young ones, tell them how beautiful their baby is, offer them a free print of one of the photos after a shoot. Almost no one passes that up, because they have a wonderful photo to hold on to. I didn't feel guilty doing it because genuinely it makes people happy. I stopped taking meticulous notes of every interaction that was worth following up on. I used to make notes for the next shift about how X customer had seemed interested but was unconvinced and that a simple reminder of the offer would probably be enough to get them to buy. Or I would make a note about someone who forgot their passport photos and whether or not they had paid already. And then, on my last day, the truest malicious compliance happened. They wanted me gone. Okay. I took my name tag and packed it away. I went into the photo studio and grabbed the kids' toys I had brought in to help get the young ones to cooperate. Babies don't really understand a stranger saying smile for the camera, but if you shake or rattle at them and make silly faces, they're very good at smiling for that. I cleaned up all of the things I had laid out neatly for easy preparation and put them back in storage. I cleaned up the counters to get rid of all the notes and passport photos that weren't claimed that day because that was what we were technically supposed to do. And then came the real part that this title refers to. Over my 9 months working there, a number of issues had come up with the things we worked with. For the passport photos, we needed a paper trimmer to slice off the edges quickly and neatly. We had one when I started, and then it broke. I brought in a replacement. It got broken too. Still, we needed one, so I brought in another replacement. We also had got our stapler stolen. No worries, I had one at home we could use. And the keys to the storage, the extra receipt paper, the passport paper, where we keep the deposits, where we keep our paper files, they were tiny. And the color of them was so bland that throughout the course of the day, they would get lost easily 30 times. I had bought a large blue fluffy keychain to attach to it with permission from the boss. Never lost the keys again, not one of us. We had also had a sign when I started there, which we could pop out, which said, "I'm in a photo shoot, please be patient, I'll be with you in a moment," or something along those lines, because there was often only one employee at a time, and they had to do the photo shoots and all of the passport photo drop-ins. Well, my boss accidentally dumped her coffee on that sign after she tripped one day. So I went out of the way to get a new one printed, bought a plastic sleeve for it, and set it up with a cardboard backing so it wouldn't break or get ruined. It was better than the old one. So, of course, when I left, I took my sign, my keychains, my paper trimmer, my stapler, my toys, and notably, my shutter button. See, the camera had a shutter button attached that would allow you to move about while snapping photos. Again, helped with the little ones because they don't understand directions, so you have to be able to physically draw their attention somewhere. This cord had gotten frayed and not replaced. It shocked me nasty enough to leave a burn. so I took it off the camera and brought in my own. I got a call the next day asking me how dare I steal the company's supplies. I calmly replied that I had just taken back the items that belonged to me, and that they could keep the broken paper trimmer that I had brought in. I even left them a pair of scissors I bought for a backup when the first paper cutter broke. I even bought them a box of paper clips for using since they didn't have a stapler anymore. The store closed down not 2 months later. Crazy how when you fire your hardest worker over things that you told them to do, and one missed shift, other employees are less than enthused about the chance of the same thing happening. And no one else worked nearly as hard to keep everything in the black as I did. Not to say there's anything wrong with that, I liked everyone except the manager, since it was only 2 other employees and they did their work well and treated me nicely. They just had a better sense of doing what they were paid for and nothing else. And for reference, the employee who the customer felt I was treating badly looked at our manager like she was insane and asked when I had done that, because she knew for a fact that the only time I raised my voice at either herself or the only other employee was because it was too loud for them to hear me otherwise. She apologized to me, said that she was worried it was her fault because she had been a little nervous that day because she was dealing with other things, and was worried that the customer had gotten the wrong impression because of that. Said employee then went on to have her own gallery show, leaving shortly after I was fired. Now, OP added an edit on to the end of the story because apparently a lot of people in the comments were asking why they worked 2 weeks after they were fired. They said, simply enough, there was no one to cover my shifts. One employee was in China celebrating New Year's with her grandparents. One was working on her own photos, which became her gallery show. And the manager would be very over 40 hours if she worked my shifts too. And I needed the money and wanted to say goodbye to some of the kids and parents who I took photos of every month. Relatively common, a lot of them wanted photos of their babies as they grew and changed. Though this has reminded me of one sweet thing they told me, so thanks for questioning it all. One of the families said they wouldn't be rebooking next month then because no one else had gotten their kid to take such nice photos. It felt awesome. It's been 6 years, so I had forgotten about that. So this place had a strike system where the strikes never fell off, so once you had 3 of them, you were done. It sounds to me like this place was just made to churn out staff so they could have cheaper people coming in on a regular basis. Knowing that these were the rules, I can't see any reason to be happy about going into work, because if you make one simple mistake, you're gonna get a strike, and that's gonna put a damper on your further employment there in the future. What a load of crap. This next story comes to us from Practical Dad Advice, Malicious Compliance to Malicious Compliance. Let's jump right in. I run a repair shop where I employ a bunch of local kids, ages 16 plus, to learn skills and make some money while we generally sit around and talk about the world while we fix things. We had a client come in with a busted electronic. We fixed it up for her and gave her a decent discount on the work. Her final bill for parts and 4 hours of labor was $100 even, discounted down from $220. She didn't like the bill. She didn't like the work. She claimed that we'd broken something else. She claimed that the kid who did the work didn't know what she was doing. She did, and I had supervised her. And that the kid who helped her in the front room was rude to her. He wasn't, but she didn't like the little pride flag pin he was wearing. She demanded to see the manager, so I popped out, listened to her tear into my kids, validated how she was feeling, but pointed out that the work she had asked for was done correctly, and her bill was due on pickup of the piece. The last straw for her came when she pulled out a credit card, and I had to inform her that we don't accept that particular card. She literally asked me, "Do you know who I am?" Which I didn't. Still don't care. And I told her we'd take a personal check. She wrote out a check, problem solved. I deposited the day's checks and got a note from my bank that one had bounced. Her check, of course. I called her the next day to inform her that her check had been returned for insufficient funds, and that she'd need to come in and pay her bill, plus the extra fee for a return check. All of these fees, just to point this out, were clearly outlined on the service agreement she'd signed, and we'd already discounted her $120 just to be nice. Anyway, she rolls up into the office carrying a bag, and I knew exactly what was going on. She drops, of course, a bag of pennies on the front desk. She's breathing heavily. We're on the second floor and she'd taken the stairs. And she announces triumphantly that she's here to pay her bill. She just needs to go get the rest of our hard-earned money. Said with a sneer, of course. The kid at the front desk looks like he's about to cry, so I stop working on the thing I'm working on and take over. How many more bags do you have? I ask her, and she says that the nice people at the bank loaded them up in her car. She didn't count them. I told her that was fine. We'd wait for her to bring them all up and then settle her bill. She was expecting a bigger reaction, I think. Either that or she hadn't thought this through. 10,000 pennies plus the extra $25 weighs a lot, and she just committed to carrying them through the parking lot and up a flight of stairs. One of my kids, bless his heart, offered to help her carry them. She refused. Finally, shaking and sweaty, she deposited the last of the bags on the countertop. The pennies were loose, not in coin rolls. She'd done some work to prove her point. What she hadn't counted on was that we'd need to count the pennies. While the other kids took care of other clients and fixed things in the back, the front desk guy and I counted up the pennies. She started to realize that this was going to take a while and tried to leave. I told her that she couldn't leave until we'd signed off on her bill, since at this point she was in violation of her service agreement and had passed a bad check. We couldn't just take her word for it, and I would inform our local constabulary if she left without paying. I was kinda talking out my butt, but she managed to tick me off a little. The other clients in the shop came and went, and we counted. Phone calls came in and were handled by my kids, and we counted. She sat down in a chair, folding steel, not super comfortable, stood up again, walked around the office, and we counted. After a while, she said, "Just forget it," and took out $125 in bills. We signed off on her agreement, and she started to leave. Another one of my kids, bless his heart, asked her if she wanted help carrying the pennies back to her car. She looked at all of us with a face of sheer panic, mumbled, "No thank you, just keep them," and bolted. The whole shop was silent for a moment. Then one of the kids started giggling, and nobody could stop. People coming in thought we'd gone nuts, and I finally had to banish everybody to the back room until they could breathe again. We loaded the bags into my vehicle. We used the elevator she'd walked by a few times, took them to the bank, and used the coin machine to deposit them. Then wrote out a donation to our local shelter for the amount she'd dropped off. She posted something nasty on Facebook about it and got ratioed. She had, of course, posted earlier about what she was going to do, and she got called out with her own post. My favorite response was something like, "You said you were going to pay your bill in pennies? You paid your bill in pennies. What went wrong?" Please don't pay your bills in pennies, folks, especially if you're just doing it to be a dick. I think OP gained a whole lot of real-life karma points for this story. Number 1, they were helping out local youths. Number 2, they were patient with a butthole. Number 3, they were teaching youths how to deal with conflict calmly. And of course, they had a donation at the end for number 4. They didn't just pocket the money, and that right there is also a great lesson for the youths. This next story comes to us from EX Animus. Not giving me a written contract? Sure, let's jump right in. Longtime lurker, first time poster, this happened to my partner, but I'll try to tell it as if it's my own story for a better reading experience. I worked at a small coffee shop as a barista. On the first day, I told my boss, the owner, that I would like to sign a written contract, so that it's less likely to create conflicts about the working terms and conditions. He said, "I'd give you a written contract when you've passed probation." Okay, maybe he's environmentally friendly and wanted to save a tree or something. I asked if there would be more day offs after probation. He said, yeah, 1 more day off per month. 3 months gone by, which normally would mean past probation. I asked again for the offs. He said, you must have been mistaken. It was unpaid public holidays before 3 months, but now they are paid public holidays, so it equals to 1 more off per month. Firstly, paid public holidays after 3 months of employment is a law in my place. It isn't some perk that he generously granted me, nor something that anyone in the workforce wouldn't know. Secondly, I asked him for the number of day offs, not the number of other kinds of rest days. The context in the conversation was entirely different. I mean, if he also counted annual leaves, PTO in my place, or sick leaves, that number could have pumped way up. I felt like he tricked me, but I couldn't prove that because anything he promised were only words. The one thing that made me decide to leave the place was that in COVID times, if a staff is tested positive, obviously the shop should close. Other staffs get tested and get professionals to deep clean the shop. But no, my boss decided to do none of that. A colleague got COVID. We were required to operate as usual, hiding the fact that we have a COVID positive staff from customers that were entering and drinking our products. It was even required to clean the shop with the usual apparatus. As a non-professional COVID cleaner and very likely COVID positive patient. Here comes the malicious compliance. In my place, if you pass probation, normally after 3 months as is aforementioned, you need 4 weeks notice. Within probation period, 1 week is enough. I handed in my letter. Boss said I need to stay 4 weeks so that he could find a replacement and have me train my successor, because normally that's how it works. I said no. You promised me a signed contract after probation. You didn't give me one. My offer wasn't reviewed, didn't get a raise, you didn't even tell me I passed probation. Thanks for not giving me that written contract. I'm gonna leave in a week. He tried to argue, but no legit points came out of him. The fallout. After I told him I quit, another barista also handed in his resignation letter. He needed 4 weeks though, and also a kitchen staff. My replacement sucks so much that he has given up teaching. The coffee shop has lost all staffs that can make good coffee, along with the skills that we carry. So in this case, you could say that the boss got roasted. OP put him in the espresso lane to justice. He didn't even have the decency to treat OP like a human being. At least now OP can hit the grounds running for a new job. I thought that was going to be a latte funnier than it was. This next story comes to us from Rock and Roll and Blues and Jazz. Document hoarding bureaucrat gets exactly what they asked for. Let's jump right in. Little House on the Prairie, European Union. A small farm in European Union was applying for an EU agricultural subsidy for a storehouse, big enough for storing a couple of farming vehicles and odd bits of this and that, otherwise lying around the farm like orphaned rounds of cheese. Nothing fancy. EU is notorious for the exhausting amount of paperwork needed for any kind of agricultural subsidy. The process is usually both long and tedious. Ask any farmer if you don't take my word. On top of that, you have the local government adding their mostly unnecessary and confusing bureaucratic sprinkles to the cake. Because who just doesn't love good old paperwork, yay? Does it really exist? The building already there and in use. Farm Boss has been engaged with the subsidy application process since the beginning of the project over 2 years. Literally hundreds of emails, calls, and letters have been exchanged between various instances. Application process is like this, nothing abnormal about that. A bureaucrat had to be convinced that a building has been built and it's for the intended purpose. Note, a building permit, a proof of a bank loan, the building inspector's report, and photographs of the actual building were not enough evidence. Apparently, a storehouse doesn't stand on its concrete foundation, housing farming equipment and material, before a bureaucrat acknowledges the matter. An existential crisis of architectural sorts, I suppose. Finally, after much struggle and convincing, a bureaucrat acknowledged officially that a storehouse has been built and it's used for its intended purpose. Aforementioned part of the bureaucracy is not essentially part of the malicious compliance story itself, nor was it the only one. But before proceeding, I wanted to give you, dear reader, a palpable example of a mucus-oozing snail that is a bureaucrat. Was it really paid for? Now, another bureaucrat wants to know all the costs claimed in the subsidy application have actually been paid. Makes sense, you don't want to assist scammers who forge fake invoices and payments. In this project, there were some 150, give or take, financial transactions involved for material, labor, insurance, permits, etc. Want all the invoices? You got it. Want all the receipts? Okie dokie. Want the bookkeeping statements? If you say so. The last one has special significance. Bookkeeping statements contain a legally binding track of every single invoice and payment. Bookkeepers swear on the blood of their firstborn baby it's correct. Even the tax office is happy with that, and they are not easy folk to please. But the local government sitting on top of the EU money, which even isn't their money? No, not enough for them. They want to be super duper extra hyper sure how every single last nut, bolt, and screw was paid for. Because maybe Farm Boss is just a scammer who likes to spend 2 years on paperwork. Regardless, the fact that the little storehouse stands proud and stout in a farm, which has existed for decades in the exact same location. Enter Smog's lair. Like a dragon hoarding gold and treasure to sleep upon, a bureaucrat hoards information and documents, apparently to sleep upon too. Local government bureaucrat wants to be able to track every single financial transaction. Not by invoice number, not by invoice date, not by invoice sum, not by combination of these. No, they want the project references. Not sure about the exact translation of this, combined with the actual payments. It's a 10-digit code attached to each part of the storehouse building project. For example, the roof has its own code under which all parts, labor, etc. go. After some hassle with the accountant agency and the bank, such list was materialized. It took only 2 weeks, so it was a quickie compared to the whole process. It was an impressive 831 pages long PDF document, so big because of dozens of payments, small and big, far and near, accumulated over the time span of 2 years. Every single financial transaction, the information needed for the subsidy application is spammed through the document, maybe some 50 odd pages. Just deliver the 50 odd pages, easy peasy? Bureaucrat says no. Obviously, one can't omit the unrelated pages, because bureaucrat wants to observe the document both consistent and continuous. In other words, if the total page count is 831, that's how many pages there has to be. End of discussion. Happy bunny now? Okay, you'll get the whole document. Happy now, bureaucrat? No. All the information is there. How come? Nope, we bureaucrats want to find the information easily, but we have already provided the cross-reference list with all project references and invoice numbers. How's that? No can do. We bureaucrats want easy. How about pressing Ctrl F, search? That's easy as 1, 2, 3. Nope, we bureaucrats want to have project references highlighted on paper because that's easy. But it'd be a ton of paper. Wouldn't it surely be easier to use the electronic format? Sensible arguments overwhelmed by angry bureaucratic noises? No, absolutely no. Highlighted, on paper, easy. Now you, dear reader, already know what time it is. It's Malicious Compliance o'clock. Farm Boss goes through the PDF with Ctrl F and uses the marker tool to highlight the project references with pretty yellow. 1 day's work, then sit back and print. Numerous copies and 1 color cartridge later, there's a nice pile of A4 sheets, 4.2 kilograms, 9.3 pounds to be exact, neatly stacked and boxed, sent as a registered letter, also a bureaucratic requirement, to the bureaucrat in need of an easy documentation. Have fun browsing through papers, searching for the project references one by one, all by hand. Aftermath. For Farm Boss, this was just another day in the never-ending bureaucratic jungle. Exhausting and stressful. If you think being a farmer is easy, you apparently don't know any farmers. I take my hat off for them any day of the week. What comes to this particular bureaucrat in question? Well, they never asked for a single document more. This one's funny. It makes you think that the bureaucrat probably got those papers and just sat down and started scanning the entire thing in as a PDF and didn't even look at it. I feel that's kind of the way that bureaucracy would work. The only way this story could have been better is if they faxed all 831 pages to the bureaucrat. That was a missed opportunity. This next story comes to us from Hufflepuff Slowpoke. Sure, I'll call the tenant. Let's jump right in. Hello, it's my first time posting here, so I'm kinda nervous. Also, English is not my first language, and I don't have all details because I wasn't there, but I'll do my best. This story is about a job I just quit, and I doubt someone there uses Reddit, so I'll share it with you. Here we go. We were moving to another office, so things were chaotic. Days were really hot, so when we discovered our new office didn't have any AC, we were crushed. We tried to work there anyway, but 2 members started getting dizzy and weak, so we called our boss. He was solving some problems on our previous location, but told us to go home and not come the next day, since he'd buy a new AC and install it then. We were happy with the free day off, and my boss went on his way to buy the equipment. This story is about what happened when he bought it. So this new office was somewhere fancy. Our boss was a tenant in this building, and there were doctors, lawyers, dentists, all kinds of fancy people. Everyone wore suits and ties. Since most of the tenants were rich, the building's workers were super polite, mostly because some tenants were rude to them, acted entitled, and tried to get them fired for petty reasons. Anyway, my boss called some of his friends and said, "Hey, would you help me install an AC on my new office? I'll pay you with some beers," and they accepted. Since it was, again, really hot, my boss and their friends went there the next morning wearing tank tops, shorts, and sandals. They were greeted by someone who worked there, I don't remember his name, but I'll call him assistant, that knew who my boss was and would follow him around, answer his questions, help him with any infos about the building or the room. You know, a good human being. He was supposed to know all tenants, so everybody liked him, but I guess he wasn't in a leadership position because his workmates didn't seem to enjoy his presence. He didn't seem to care though. So assistant greeted my boss and followed him to our new room. My boss said he saw the receptionist look at them with disgust because of their clothes, but didn't think much about it. What were they supposed to do? There was only one entrance. They went upstairs and started working. Eventually, my boss noticed he forgot some tools in his car. No problem. Assistant went with him. They got it and came back. At the reception, again, Mr. Receptionist looked annoyed. Meh. My boss, who I admit wasn't the most organized, noticed he forgot to buy something. Okie dokie. Assistant, always happy to help, followed him to the entrance and waited for him to buy the tool somewhere near and come back. Again, as they got in, receptionist looked pissed. For the 3rd time, my boss had to go through the reception to do something or get something he forgot. Assistant went with him, assuring him it was okay and he had every right to come and go as he pleased. But this time, receptionist had enough. When my boss got into the building, he saw receptionist come in his direction, fuming. But he didn't say anything to my boss. Instead, he went straight to assistant and, completely ignoring my boss, said something along the lines of, "What the hell is this? Why are those people coming and going like there's no order in this building? Why don't you do anything?" Assistant just looked at him and said calmly, "I'm sorry, but they need to make as many trips as necessary to install their new AC today, so that tomorrow the team can work without any interruption or discomfort." "I don't care," said receptionist. "Those people are annoying our staff, our guests, and our tenants. This building is no place for them. If you don't stop this mess right now, I'm gonna call the tenant and tell them you're allowing such people in his new office." I think you can guess what happened next. According to my boss, assistant's face lit up and he smiled. "Oh, really? Please do. You can talk to the tenant right now if you'd like." And he turned to my boss, who just looked at him with an innocent, "Yes, how can I help you?" face. My boss said that receptionist's face went white. He tried to say something but couldn't pick the words, so he just left in a hurry. My boss and assistant laughed a while about it and went back to the office. The AC got installed and we worked the next day with ease. Again, I think I would have taken that one step further. You wouldn't turn around and say, "Yep, this is the tenant right here." You'd say, "Well, I think you should give the tenant a call." And when the receptionist went back and gave the tenant a call, the phone would ring right in front of him. This next story comes to us from Rum and Napalm. Don't want to fix the elevator? Meet the stinky cart. Let's jump right in. While I was earning my bachelor's in chemistry, I worked for the university's hazmat department. My job involved inspecting labs, disposing of old chemicals, occasionally giving people the "you have to be crapping me" stare, and plenty of other fun activities, so our esteemed researchers can figure out science in a safe environment. Quick description of the campus: one building was a more recent construction. It has 2 wings and was shaped like the vaguely S-shaped Tetris block no one loves. The east wing was full of laboratories, 3 full stories, and basement of labs. Cancer research, Alzheimer's research, deadly banana fungus research. The place housed a most prestigious staff of brilliant minds trying to solve the world's problems. The west wing housed the administrative offices of the university, accountants, bookkeepers, and assorted bean counters, HR and desk jockeys, all the way up to the dean. People who, unlike their eastern counterparts, seem to be the cause of many baffling questions like, why are our emergency expenditures still not approved? Why is there a problem with my pay slip again? And why is there so much red tape? That building was connected to the rest of the campus via underground tunnels, accessed via the basement, and had 1 elevator per wing. Now, the thing is that the loading dock is in another building, so when the labs receive their orders of chemicals, they grab their cart and scoot down the tunnel to the arrivals, load up their cart, and carry it back to the lab to be safely stored, on penalty of getting the "are you kidding me" stare or a long lecture by my boss. Important point: the rules prohibit using the stairs with hazmat, elevator only. It's safer this way. So one day the science wing's elevator breaks down. I send a request to have it fixed. At least 4 lab employees also send it. We receive the response that we all should use the administrative elevator. I replied that since one of the labs is on a sort of half floor, the only way to reach it is the science wing elevator or a flight of stairs. Highlighted the risk of falling while carrying heavy boxes of chemicals in the stairs, or how there was no way to safely carry very heavy gas cylinders up those stairs. They were having none of that. Use the administrative wing elevator. They will call to have the elevator fixed, but it is considered low priority. I showed the reply to my boss. He was the type of guy for who workplace safety is no laughing matter, and I was expecting him to reply with a strongly worded email and about 4 to 5 paragraphs from various workplace safety laws text. Instead, he had a strange smile. "Oh, don't worry, Rum, it'll soon be a priority to them." 2 days later, my boss comes in. "Rum, don't forget the biohazard truck comes tomorrow. You should collect the waste from the lab." Oh boy, biohazard day. The day where I get to leave my office, visit every lab in the university, jokingly saying, "Bring out your dead," as I enter, and having a chat with teachers, classmates, and various lab aides. I put on my lab coat and protective goggles. And don't forget, the elevator in the science wing is broken. You have to go through the administrative wing. Oh, now I get it. See, when the pencil pushers decided that fixing the elevator wasn't a priority, they didn't realize that I would be walking around with a cart filled with containers bearing a bright yellow biohazard logo, and returning with them full of old petri dishes full of culture medium. And any biochemist and microbiologist worth their lab coat will tell you, culture medium stinks. It smells like regurgitated baby food left out in the sun. So here I am, walking in front of all those nice offices and meeting rooms, the clack 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 of my cart full of biohazard announcing my arrival, and the smell of death following me. Yes, I made sure that all bags were properly sealed, but it's one of those powerful smells that just doesn't care about that. The nice lobby outside the elevator where people wait to meet the dean. "Hello, sorry about the smell." The meeting room with the open door. "Sorry about the noise. Can I get an update on that elevator?" People walking down the hall in their office suits. Wow, they sure do seem a bit nervous seeing a guy in a lab coat driving around containers with the biohazard symbol on them. Should I tell them it's harmless unless you're severely immune compromised? Nah. Oh, and my cart has only room for 3 of those containers, plus the new ones I leave to replace the full ones. Biohazard day is about 2 to 4 trips per floor. After the second of such biohazard day, we got a message stating that the elevator will be fixed over the weekend. I must be in a sarcastic mood today because all of these stories have made me think of things to do to make them even worse. on the unsuspecting people that the malicious compliance was pulled on. In this case, I would take a completely empty petri dish, an extra one, and while walking down the hallway, I would drop it on the floor, so it shatters all over the place. And then I'd say, "Oh no, what have I done? Don't worry, the smell will only be around for 24 to 48 hours, but you might not want to have open-toe sandals, or, just don't breathe in the hallway." This next story comes to us from Saint Harrop. I got back at them big time. Let's jump right in. I worked for 2 years at a tile store. I handled customers as well as worked in the warehouse. Not to brag, but for those 2 years, I worked the earliest shift that no one wanted, because you had to receive the daily truck and put the tile orders away by hand at 6 o'clock in the morning. But I also said I would work every Saturday as well. Now, I didn't do this because I hated myself and wanted to suffer. It was because I wanted the outside sales job. The outside salesman that got the job entered right after I started, and we hit it off quickly. We will call him Joe. Joe confided in me that he had no plans to continue this job after about a year or so. So from the get-go, I said I wanted that job and worked my butt off to get it. Pulling shifts no one wanted, doing jobs no one would do, and doing things that were definitely not part of my job description. This included doing a lot of the outside sales jobs. I would take over when Joe would call out or just needed help. He came to rely on me and gave me part of his job. I saw this as a type of internship and thought it would pay off. Fast forward 2 years, Joe tells me that he's about to put his 2 weeks in and to get my resume together. He puts in his 2 weeks notice. I immediately put my application in. I got the backing from both Joe and the branch manager to get the job and did a pretty good job on the interview. I knew that I was pretty much a shoo-in for the job. I had seniority and had never caused a problem in the time I was there. I had a very good relationship with the contractors I sold to and knew all of them by name. The main part of the outside sales job was working with the contractors, so I felt confident to say the least that I had what the company was looking for. 2 other employees applied as well, an ex-convict who had anger problems. That will come up later. We will call him Bob, and a recently hired woman who had no experience in tile. We will call her Anne. The only other job she had ever done was as a secretary, and she was currently just helping customers with selections. Both of them were older than me. I was in my early 20s and both of them in the 30s. A couple days after that, I got a call from HR telling me I didn't get the job. Instead, they wanted to give it to Anne. I won't lie, I thought I misheard or it was a prank at first. The only reason HR would give me as to why they passed me up for the position was, "You're just too good of a worker and valuable at your position for us to lose you. You do such a good job and are so responsible, we would hate to lose that. So, because I'm good at my job, you won't hire me for another one with more responsibilities? Yep, but to show you how much we appreciate you, we are giving you a $1 raise. Do I still get my yearly $1 raise on top of this in a couple months? No, think of this as we're giving it to you 2 months early." I was fuming for a couple of days. Their excuse didn't make sense, and I had a feeling that I was being discriminated against due to my age. However, I was set upon making a point that they chose the wrong person and came up with a plan. Because I was so good at my job, I didn't get the outside sales job. So if I was bad at my job, maybe they would promote me then. Let me rephrase. I wasn't bad at my job, but I told my manager that I no longer would work the morning shift, would no longer be there on Saturdays, would no longer do the worst jobs, and would no longer be doing any jobs that fell outside my description, including the outside sales job I had been helping with. Anne goes out for a couple of weeks for training and personal time, during which things are already starting to fall apart. My manager asks me to fill in for Anne just while she is away. He understands why I'm doing what I am, but asks as a personal favor. I agree, and things begin to get back where they were before. Anne comes back and I resume my firm stand. Anytime something was supposed to be done by the outside sales position that I normally did, I would send it her way. Customers, problems, heavy to lift things, and other favors I used to do for Joe, I refused to do for her. It gave me a little relief to see her running everywhere, trying to get everything done. She only asked me once to help her, to which I just told her that it wasn't my job. Those first couple of weeks, things were a little rough, as most of the jobs were left over from when Joe and I were running things. So most of the problems came from the daily grind. But the weeks that followed were chaotic to say the least. Items came in late, jobs were missing or unordered, contractors didn't understand where their materials were. Mind you, these guys get paid per job, so every day their material isn't there is another day they don't work or get paid. So when their materials don't come in, their workers, who are paid hourly, are getting paid for no reason at all. My favorite one is when she accidentally sent an order across the country, costing the company thousands as we lost money on that job. As things were starting to turn into the dumpster fire I knew it would, HR called me in to talk about my attitude. "We have heard of your attitude as of late. It doesn't sound like you're being a team player." Well, I am sorry to hear that. Have I said something hurtful to someone? No. Did I hurt someone's feelings unintentionally? No. I don't understand what attitude you're talking about then. "We have received word that you aren't being as helpful as you were to Joe as you are now to Anne." Well, you see, I'm far too valuable at my current job. I can't possibly detract away from that. They immediately saw that they made a mistake in giving me that reason as to why they didn't hire me. They then told me that I needed to be more of a team player and would pay me an additional $1 an hour when the yearly raise came around in 2 months. I told them that it wasn't my job to do what they were asking, and if they wanted me to do that, they would have to negotiate my contract. They told me that they would need to discuss it and to reconsider being a team player. I didn't relent, and they weren't interested in renegotiating my contract. Well, 2 months after Anne got the job and things went to hell, she stepped down. Again, I put my resume in, as did Bob. Now, remember how I said that he had a slight anger issue? Well, that came to a head just before Anne put her 2 weeks notice in. Bob threatened a contractor. The contractor was a real piece of work, but that doesn't excuse the fact that Bob threatened the guy. Regardless, with this now happening and Anne putting in her 2 weeks, I couldn't see how they couldn't hire me. It was me or someone who threatened customers. I once again go through the process, but this time I play my cards close to my chest. They didn't know that after Anne was first chosen over me, I started to look for a new job. Just as this interview process was going on, a company called me back and offered me an outside sales job at their company. It was lower pay than my current company's, but they didn't need to know that. They also did not need to know that I accepted the position and told them I needed to finish my 2 weeks. I wasn't going to give them my 2 weeks though. I was going to make it look like it was a competition and try to string it for those 2 weeks. The company offered me the outside sales job and nearly begged me to take it. They apologized for making the bad decision of picking Anne over me, and told me that they would love to have me in the position. Now, let the fun begin. I promptly told them that I would need to think about this, as their competitor had also just offered me that same job for a higher pay. The look on their faces was to die for. I pretended that it was back and forth for 2 weeks, which conveniently went over Anne's quitting date and my new job starting date. They got anxious because they now didn't have anyone for the job and finally gave me a final offer. I promptly shot them down and told them I didn't want to work for a company that treats hardworking employees like crap. They can sleep in the bed they made. Then I told them I was starting the next day at the other company. I have never been so happy. A lot of people in management positions look at the people below them and think, well, they have to keep this job. It's all they have. What they don't realize is that there are other opportunities out there, and we will actively seek them out. When you have an employee that's doing this much extra work, it's up to you as a manager supervisor to keep them happy. If you don't, they might just start doing their regular work, no extra work, and then you're in a huge bind that you can't get out of. This next story comes to us from My Posting Name 13. You're capping commissions on our most in-demand vehicles because you're not doing any extra work, so you shouldn't get extra money. Fine, let's see how that works out for you. Let's jump right in. I realized that this story could absolutely be current, but it's not. Another thread reminded me of it, and I think it absolutely fits here, so here goes. Back in 2014, I was selling cars, Ford specifically. For all those who aren't car buffs, both the Mustang and F-150 were getting ground-up redesigns for 2015, and Ford had just announced that there would be no Shelby Mustangs or Raptor F-150s for 2015. Instantly, we were fielding several calls a day about these vehicles, and almost overnight, the inventory we had came with a $10,000 to $20,000 market adjustment due to demand. Our GM loved both vehicles and traded for them whenever he could because he loved chatting about them with buyers. So we had 21 Raptors and 6 Shelbys still on the lot when I sold a ruby red Raptor extended cab at $10,000 over sticker the last week of the month. Both are crazy numbers for the 200 new cars we sold per month. With the trade, I was due about $4,200 in commission, but my check was about $1,700 light. Come the first Saturday morning meeting after payday, we were told that commissions on such vehicles would be capped at $2,500, retro to last month, per a previously ignored provision in our pay plan. There was much grumbling, but management stood firm, citing how incredibly easy Raptor and Shelby deals were. They weren't wrong about that. There was no such thing as a test drive until the deal was done. You could absolutely drive the car before you bought it, but only after we had a signed buyer's order, credit app, and the deal had been submitted and approved. They were generally in and out in under 45 minutes, if not half an hour. But still, dealerships get free money and don't want to share? Cue malicious compliance. I talked to several other salespeople who to a man were pissed, and we colluded. I whipped up a little Excel macro widget that would take the invoice price and holdback, add in pack and whatnot, and spit out a sales price that would produce an exactly $2,500 commission. I sent it to every salesperson we had, and everyone used it. It only took 3 signed buyer's order with seemingly arbitrary numbers for the desk to figure out what we were doing and to call another meeting. That meeting was basically management yelling at us, and the entire sales staff calmly saying, "Remove the cap, or you'll never see another signed buyer's order that exceeds it. F you." The cap was lifted 3 days later. Commission caps are a great way to get your employees to work hard until they hit that cap number, and then they do absolutely nothing. I really like the way the sales numbers were worked out in this one though, because the employees realized if they weren't getting that extra commission, then they were going to make sure that management wasn't going to get it either. This next story comes to us from Guy from Death Valley. They wanted me to be precisely on time, so I did. Let's jump right in. This occurred while I was still in apprenticeship at my current workplace a few years ago. It was never really commented on by management, but was internal within my department. We have an electronic time-stamping system to log our work hours. When we arrive, start work, we stamp in, and when we leave, we stamp out. The log time is then uploaded at the end of the month, and our monthly worked overtime is calculated. At the time, my daily habit was, if my shift started at 12:30, I'd leave home at 12 and be at work roughly 12:15 or 12:20, depending on traffic. In really bad cases, it can be 12:25. Now, it's relevant to know that for every hour, there are time spans in which 2 people have to be present at work at all times. From 12 to 12:15, 12:30 to 12:45, 13 to 13:15, and so on. So the employee could only leave his position when his replacement in work clothes was present and logged. That's why I was oftentimes quite early. If I arrived at, say, 12:20, I'd immediately log in, change into my work clothes, and while I did that, the colleague I replaced could change clothes and go home, since I'd be ready at 12:30 at least. Now, there was one colleague who did not like that, mainly because I'd collect overtime for that, even though other colleagues could take that time off their schedule. So he told me to be logged in precisely on time, at 12:30. Though he wanted me to already be in my work clothes before logging in. Since we weren't allowed to wear our work clothes outside of work, including the work commute, he wanted me to be early at work to change my clothes, to send a colleague off so they could change their clothes while still logged in and leave for home, while myself only collecting the time my shift is. So I did pretty much that. I'd be at work at 12:25. If I was early, I'd sit in my car in the parking lot and wait. Then at 12:25, would go in, change my clothes, and stamp in, which could take more than 5 minutes to do. And because I wasn't early enough, my replacement could not leave early and would make overtime they didn't want. Of course, most colleagues didn't mind that. Nobody cares about staying 10 minutes longer. But a certain colleague did absolutely not like that. This entire thing then ended up backfiring on him when I didn't make enough work hours, since he also demanded I log out when I'm done with work early in the evenings. So with each week, my time account would shrink and shrink. They'd have me work additional days, but they could not do that all the time because as an apprentice, I wasn't allowed to work more than 5 days a week, which I already regularly did. They also could not let me work additional hours per day because as an apprentice, I wasn't legally allowed to work more than 8 hours per day either. So of course, at some point, the department management asked questions on why I'm constantly missing hours, on why the apprentice is working weekends too often, and why is he making 9 or 10-hour shifts. After a month, he stopped complaining about me being early, and ever since then, things have worked flawlessly until Corona hit. I was wondering why OP was taking orders from another employee and not from management in this case, but then I realized that it was an apprenticeship situation. OP was an apprentice, and the person that they were taking orders from was a full-time employee. One other thing to quickly note is that if your employer requires you to change into uniform and not wear that uniform outside of the workplace, that means that you can do all of the changing, the coming to work and changing, the leaving work and changing before you leave, on work time. You are entitled to be paid for that time because it's a requirement of your job. This next story comes to us from PMC 666. HR discovered that subjective rules can be applied subjectively, much to their annoyance. Let's jump right in. Here is a story from a while ago with malicious compliance on the part of my manager. It was just after 2000, and as I was working in IT, there had been a busy year leading up to the millennium. Now everyone was looking to get back to normal. The company had other plans for us and decided to make a third of the IT staff redundant. In my team of 12, this meant 4 of us. This wasn't really a problem, as even though I had just moved into IT a few years earlier, the job market was booming and getting a new job would be easy. This HR move was a bit of a surprise as we were very busy. Lots of the routine projects had been put on hold, so lots of catching up, but whatever, they knew best. Redundancy with this company offered a month's salary per year of service, way over the legal minimum. They were offering me a year's salary tax-free, mostly, to find a better paying job elsewhere. An offer that would be hard to say no to, but unfortunately, they were not going to ask. The way redundancy works for this company in the UK is that all the occupants of the role are ranked by very carefully selected criteria, and the lowest ranked are goners. The way the criteria are selected are to make them very subjective and capable of withstanding any legal challenge that might lead to an industrial tribunal. If there was one thing HR hated above all, it was legal hassles. Criteria would be things like expected to be able to contribute well in other divisions of the company, and other such evidence-free bullocks. Why this weird approach from HR? It isn't as daft as it may appear. When trying to reduce headcount, the options in the UK are natural wastage, offering early retirement, offering voluntary redundancy, or having compulsory redundancies. In a team role in IT at this time, what tends to happen is that nobody is old enough to retire, and offering early retirement was actually expensive, as it was based on a generous company policy. Offering voluntary redundancy means the deadwood stays. Forcing a selection process stops the good people leaving, no redundancy money, and allows getting rid of the poor performers, or at least that was the plan. Anyway, my manager had been told he was being made redundant, which was a bit of a tactical error. He wasn't really adhering to the company line as strictly as he might have been had the circumstances been different. He gathered us together and asked who wanted to go. 4 of us, me included, volunteered. So all was good and everyone in the team was happy. My manager, maliciously complying with the ranking exercise, duly ranked us by the contrived criteria but interpreted to our ends and not the company's. These rankings were passed to HR, process were run, runes scried, oracles consulted, and ultimately decisions made. Lo and behold, the gang of 4 came bottom of the pack. Because of the extremely subjective nature of the criteria, nobody could prove the rankings were wrong. My manager then let the team know who was staying and who was going, as was right and proper, and we each got "bye-bye loser" or "you're still on board" letters from HR. That wasn't the end of it though. HR somehow twigged they were being stitched up by my manager. Comparing the people leaving with the people with the highest annual appraisal scores was an exact fit. HR went into recovery mode and tried briefly to revoke the redundancies. This would have been totally legal except for one thing. It had been announced that we were bottom of the selection criteria. Continued employment would have been unthinkable, as we were declared least competent to do the job, and they still wanted rid of 1/3. If they had insisted, this would have been potentially constructive dismissal, either for the gang of 4 in a weird backwards way. This is when the employer makes life untenable for the employee, such as saying you are rubbish at your job and they want rid of you. Or, if another 4 were selected, then obviously the process was flawed and they claim unfair dismissal, company not complying with their own process. Considering the entire rigmarole, particularly the selection criteria ruse, was designed to avoid legal hassles, they were painted into a corner and had to let the 4 of us go. So thanks Dave for playing the system so well to get the outcome the employees and not HR wanted. Epilogue: it was, as expected, easy to get a new job in those halcyon days. I had decided to take 3 months off, but a really attractive role came up. I started 5 weeks later and have been there ever since. Epilogue 2: eventually, talking to my friends who stayed, this round of redundancies was, as I sort of suspected, the precursor to eventual outsourcing. This was very much in vogue back then. About 2 or 3 years later, the overly slimmed down organization was transferred, called TOOP in the UK, transfer of undertaking, protection of employment, to an outsourcer. A bullet dodged there. TOOP means you transfer on your current pay and conditions, and you will rot with that salary, etc., until it is worse than your new employer's standard T&Cs. No pay rises, bonuses, increased holiday entitlement, nothing. This obviously also ends in another "the deadwood stays" situation, as anyone who can get another job will as soon as the market moves past them. I'm not even going to pretend that I know how things work in the UK. All of this redundancy stuff kinda went over my head. But what I did get out of this story was that you had a boss that was willing to go to bat for you and get you what you wanted. That's a great person. Too bad they were losing their job. This next story comes to us from Credence Fearwater. Good luck when you end up costing the organization serious money in revenue loss, data loss, disaster recovery costs, etc. You're right, I really did need a vacation. Let's jump right in. I'm a young brown female in a company that is much older and mostly white. Honestly, it's usually not that big of a deal because we work remote, and I work mostly with the same groups of people, and they know me and respect me now that I've earned it. But I also work a cross-functional role, so I lead company strategy and specific initiatives that reach across the organization. And of course, I deal with a lot of people ignoring me and confirming everything I say with my white male boss. But I also have a pretty great boss who will direct them right back to me, or more likely, ignore them till they just come to me on their own. This time, I was working with this individual who was leading another team, who, if it matters, is definitely a much more operational resource than myself. He and his team were assigned by their manager, who also openly questions my age and experience constantly, as a joke, to be my resources for this business-critical project. However, either willfully or otherwise are incapable of the smallest tasks, or do it carelessly, and break our workflows, etc. They won't even Google or Stack Exchange to find the right answer, and it honestly blows my mind. I decided it's better to just do it for them and not take credit, because otherwise it would be weeks off track and still incomplete. Every week they have questions that the team lead sends in an email to my boss with me copied that I will answer because it's my effing initiative. And mind you, I was hired for this role because I'm considered a thought leader in my field. And my boss does not have a clue to be able to answer it even if he wanted to, nor does he care. And they will ignore me and do what they want anyway, which I will spend many nights fixing on top of my already 10-hour days. One day, I answered and got frustrated and asked, without anyone else on copy, why I was answering if they weren't going to even acknowledge it or change what they were doing. And he says to me, with his manager on copy, because the questions weren't for you. These are strategy decisions that I need confirmation from, insert my manager name on. So I said okay. I brought up the situation with my manager, who said, okay, we have to be careful with fragile egos, as they were with the organization for many years, and probably didn't enjoy direction from someone younger and new. So he said, you've done your job, let them do theirs now. So I did. I stopped answering questions not directed at me, stopped doing their work for them, and started sending more detailed do's and don'ts to the team, and have my project manager, a wonderful woman who is also ignored of course, send weekly executive project updates to their manager as well as mine, etc. This report includes cost impact and risk. This was about 3 months back. Unbeknownst to the aforementioned team, I had already succeeded as far as my role was concerned. I presented my strategy along with expectations and assumptions, aka the do's and don'ts I continued to share with the team, and they continued to ignore, at the end of the first phase of this work. This was also about 3 months ago, coincidentally when I stopped fixing their mistakes and answering questions not meant for me. I also raised concerns with their manager, who ignored them, with my manager on copy, who also ignored them, but he tends to do that. The only response I got was a joke from the team's manager saying I needed a vacation. Cut to last week, a critical milestone for the project, the exact week I decided to take my PTO, because he's right, I did need a vacation. And just as I had said it would at this milestone, the entire project came crashing down. The data backups were of course not even saved appropriately, so we couldn't even recover that quickly. I, of course, did keep backups without letting the team know, because I'm not that petty. The biggest mistake you can make in an organization like mine is to disrupt business continuity, and let's just say business was seriously discontinued. Laugh out loud, as I said it would be to anyone who would listen, because business continuity disruptions mean big money losses. So anyway, I get a series of calls during my week off from my boss, and I didn't even have to explain the situation to him because he was on copy for most of this. I had done everything, including save the day with my backup data backup in case they screwed up. I got showered with praises from my superiors, and I took the opportunity to pitch my boss a new initiative to lead, and of course it was a hit, as he was riding the wave of commendations to him as well for his department crushing it. Have relatively no clue what happened to the team that was working with me though, guaranteed not much in the way of an actual consequence, but you know, they were under fire and will be for a long time. This story was very specifically non-specific. Like, we have no idea what you actually do there, OP, or your boss, or anybody else for that matter. But we do know that you covered your butt, your boss's butt, and your whole department, and let the other team fail. So, I'd say you did a great job. This next story comes to us from SagaNuts18. Don't stop painting the mural? Sure thing, boss. Let's jump right in. For the last 3 years, I have worked as a muralist for a mural company. It's hard work, but also rewarding, as I was beautifying public spaces. I had a good boss. He was a skilled painter who worked alongside us on big projects, in addition to providing us with plenty of financial incentives and encouragements. Unfortunately, he retired last year and gave full control of the company to his business partner. It immediately became a crap show. The business partner controlled the administration side of the company. He was not a painter and didn't understand the work it took. He would overbook clients and overpromise on completion dates. He never offered us incentives and would only berate us for not getting jobs done quick enough. We tried to tell him that the old boss have always encouraged us to take our time and deliver the best mural, as the company's reputation rested on the quality of our work. We also tried to explain that as artists, we want to be proud of the work that we put out there. He brushed it off with, "You're paid to finish jobs, just get it done." This was incredibly demoralizing, and after 2 months of churning out rushed work, we were burned out. One of our 4 muralists quit. The final straw came 3 months later. Our company won a huge bid to paint the side of a 5-story tall building using my design. I told the boss that it would take us 5 weeks to complete. However, a week before the project was due to start, he told us that we had 3 weeks. We protested, citing that we're down 1 muralist, safety issues, weather changes, and the complexity of the design. He, of course, told us that the contract had been signed and brushed off our concerns. He did, however, offer us financial incentives for overtime work this time, and knowing that there was nothing we could do, we accepted it. I simplified the design and we planned to stay late. The weather got bad as predicted. There were a few days of rain where we barely got work done. We fell behind and told the boss that he had to get us an extension. Our client was nice enough to grant another week, but our boss was pissed. He would show up to the job site regularly just to rush us. On the 3rd week, we were working when a light drizzle started. We were waiting in our cars hoping that it would pass when the boss showed up. The moment he saw us, he started accusing us of being lazy. To quote, "This is why we're falling behind." One of my coworkers said through gritted teeth, "Can't you see it's raining?" But before we could explain why we couldn't paint in the rain, the boss yelled, "If you're scared of a little drizzle, you shouldn't be a muralist. Get back to work." My coworker shot me a look, and I knew immediately the malicious compliance was on. The 3 of us got back on the scaffolding and began working. The boss smugly said, "See, that wasn't so hard," and drove off. We kept our smiles to ourselves. When the boss returned that afternoon, he was horrified. The rain had washed the wet paint down the building, leaving paint streaks dripping onto the rest of the mural. Basically, the whole mural, 3 weeks worth of work, was ruined. We noticed him staring slack-jawed, but we just kept painting. Then, he called us down and cursed us out with all sorts of profanity. When asked, "What the F were you guys thinking?" my coworker replied, "Well, you were the one who told us to do it." My boss's face turned beet red. Then he asked, "How the hell are we going to fix this?" My coworker simply replied, "You mean, how are you going to fix it? We've decided to all quit." And indeed, we had while we were working in that rain. We packed up our tools as the boss went from yelling to begging to yelling again. We just ignored him. That was the last day that we were on site. I felt so relieved the moment I got home. The aftermath. I got a call a week later from my old boss. I was ready to tell him that I won't come back to work, but it turned out that he just wanted to check in on me. He apologized for what happened. He also told me that my new boss lost the contract and had to fork out the money to repaint the whole wall blank again so that another muralist can take over. The company is floundering now. The new boss can't find anyone to replace us, and he probably never will. What he didn't realize was that finding even one good muralist willing to work for a company is difficult, let alone a team. Most muralists are more than happy to self-employ. More importantly, not many people have the skills and patience, as well as physical abilities to create beautiful large-scale artworks from great heights. I give it another few months before the company completely shuts down. My coworkers and I still keep in touch. They got a few mural projects in the work from clients that they knew during their time with the company. I help out now and then, but I'm still pretty burnt from the experience, so I think I'll look for other jobs for now. I don't really understand how some management people go from a mentality of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, to, if it ain't broke, break it. It's really not a big surprise that the company was floundering afterwards. I guess you could say the writing was on the wall. This next story comes to us from PDV Sky. No water filter change? No problemo. Let's jump right in. So I used to be a bar manager, which is an understatement. I used to do literally everything in that place, but that's another story. And I had a team of 6 people, waiters, cooks, and clean staff. So I used to deal with the everyday life of the bar, and here in Brazil, it is obligatory for the company to provide drinkable, filtered water to employees. So we had 2 water filters in the bar, one in the counter and one in the kitchen. Water filters must change filters every 3 months to continue to filter, and ours had a little red button that would light when change was needed. The first time the red light turned on, I did what I assumed was the most logical thing to do. Went to a nearby store and bought the filter. I paid around $25 converted, changed the filter, and went on with the daily routine. End of the week comes and I go to the office to close the week. Basically, I go there and give them the cash that we earned and they pay me whatever it is I had to buy for the bar. I give them the filter receipt. The guy asks me, "Did you have authorization to buy this filter?" And I said, "Well, no, we needed the filter and I bought it." And he responded that he needed to talk to the boss to see if that was okay. A week goes by and my boss calls me asking for a meeting that afternoon, which was unusual since they usually scheduled in advance. I go to the meeting and listen for half an hour how it is completely unacceptable for me to make a big purchase without authorization, and that the company had a purchasing department that makes these kinds of purchases, and that every big purchase I make, I need to send them an email and they will take care for me. They also said that the same filter was $16 online, and that I was wasting company money. So I apologize and say it won't happen again. Around a month goes by and the other filter in the kitchen also needed filter replacement. So I do as I've been told, send the purchasing team an email. A week goes by, no response. The other Monday, I receive an email asking for photos. The first email has the exact model written of the filter. I respond promptly with photos of the filter. 1 month goes by and no filter for the kitchen. I tell the kitchen staff that if they need water, they can ask me and I'll fill a jar with fresh water from the other filter. One of the days I go to the office and they ask me about the filter, and I tell them that it hasn't arrived yet. Boss was there and gets furious, calls purchasing team and makes them buy the filter online that instant. Another month goes by and the filter hasn't arrived. The other filter also needed replacement again. So I start telling the staff to get bottled water and to write every one down so I can count stock later. Around 30 bottles go in a week. I buy a lot of bottled water. The team asks me if we're getting more demand for bottles of water in the bar. I tell them no. The filters that were purchased online arrive. They don't fit. I tell the management team. They ask me to leave the filters at the office because they will change with the correct ones. I do so the same day. Staff still drinking bottled water. 3 months pass by. The filters are still seen on the office when I finally leave that company for good. One of my old employees and friends still works there. He told me they're still drinking bottled water and the new manager doesn't even know there are filters to be used. Okay, not bad OP, but you should have kept a running tally of how many bottles of water were being purchased, and then comparing that to the price of the filter cost, and then presented the total expenditures to the boss and purchasing right when you left. This next story comes to us from Urban ACC. You want everything the same color? Give me a day or two. Let's jump right in. Way back when, I lived in a student dormitory in a city in the Netherlands. This wasn't a US-style dorm. Each student had their own room, but we shared a shower, a toilet, and a kitchen. Between 16 people. Oh, joyful days. Anyhow, by the time I entered the flat, it was already 30 years old and falling to bits. So the student housing department decided to renovate the building, basically stripping it. We all got replacement rooms and a sum of money to piss off without making a fuss. So far, all good. Cue my neighbor's exit. By contract, we had to leave the room as we found it. That meant seeing to it that all the power plugs worked and filling up all the holes you'd made for hanging posters and lamps on the wall. It had become something of a tradition to perform the latter task using toothpaste. It was mainly laziness, since proper toothpaste is a good deal more expensive than wall filler. Anywho, it's what most of us did, except that my neighbor brushed her teeth with parodontax. which uses a sort of off-pink Adobe-ish color of paste, and stupidly used said brand to fill the holes in her wall. So, come inspection time, the holes she had filled with it on a white wall stuck out like sore thumbs. After about a week, she received a letter stating that she needed to make sure the walls were uniformly the same color, or face 1,000 guilder, about 800 euros in today's money fine, plus the loss of her 300 guilder deposit, within 3 days. This in spite of the fact that the rooms would be demolished shortly after, and that the student housing department was very lax when they actually had to do any repairs. After about 3 minutes of indignation, we threw together enough funds to visit the DIY store armed with a tube of Parodontax toothpaste, had a can of paint mixed with exactly that color, returned, and repainted the entire room, including everything in it, in solid Parodontax pink. When the inspector showed up a week later, he just stood there flabbergasted while my neighbor shoved his own letter in his face. The relevant sentence about uniformity indicated in yellow marker. She never heard anything about it again. I'm guessing the person who had to go in and inspect after a move out to make sure that all the holes were filled and everything was painted uniformly wasn't the same person who knew that the place was going to be torn apart afterwards. So that's why this happened. I think if they'd gone and argued this with the housing department, they wouldn't have had to do this in the end, and it would have saved them some money on paint as well. This next story comes to us from Fully Half Baked. You can't badge back in if you haven't badged out? Let's jump right in. Many years ago, I worked at a company that did phone tech support for a particular piece of well-known business software. After outgrowing the building we'd been in, the company moved to an enormous warehouse building they'd renovated into offices and cube space. The new building had separate parking areas for visitors, of which we basically had none, and employees who had to park in the rear. As part of the move, they got a new security crew who had very specific ideas about access security. First, the entrances were keyed so that you had to badge in, use your ID to unlock the door. This included the visitor's entrance. Reception had to unlock the door for visitors. Second, all doors except the front guest entrance and the rear employee's entrance were switched to exits only, and didn't have a badge reader to unlock the door from the outside. Third, they forbade anyone from permitting drafting, aka allowing someone else to enter behind you, so that you had to badge in to enter. Several people got write-ups for allowing people to come in after them just to make that point. Fourth, and the reason for the story, you had to badge out to prime your badge so that you could badge in. For fire safety, you could exit by any door without badging out. But if you did, you couldn't unlock a door to re-enter, and had to walk around to the visitor's entrance to have reception let you in. Because the front and rear entrances were around 500 meters, a quarter mile from each other, it was easy to have to waste 10 minutes getting back in the building if you forgot to badge out, and in 40 Celsius, 100 degree Fahrenheit weather for much of the summer. The explanation we were given was that they needed to know how many people were in the building in case it had to be evacuated. Of course, that information was on computers that were only accessible inside the building. So, after the first couple days during which I and nearly everyone I knew had locked themselves out at least once, I realized what I had to do. Starting on day 3, I'd enter the building, and immediately after getting through the doors, smack my badge against the exit reader to prime it to let me re-enter. Every time a coworker saw me entering the building, they'd ask me what I was doing, which I'd happily explain. Within a couple of weeks, I didn't see a single person coming through the doors who didn't swing around and smack their badge against the exit reader. And at the beginning of the next month, security sent out an email that they were no longer requiring exit badging. I like to believe that it was my doing, although it's also possible that reception was sick and tired of dealing with the lunch return rush and constantly let the smokers back into the building. Never mess with reception. A system like that only works if you're required to badge out on your way out. I understand the fire requirements, so have doors that are fire exits where if somebody pushes that door open, it sets off the fire alarm and everybody has to exit the building. On the doors that they're required to use to leave the building on a regular basis, have a badge out station there where they have to badge out to open the door. Otherwise, have a fire bar on it, and if they go out without badging out, it sets off the alarm. This next story comes to us from the Greenskeeper 420. Fix this machine at all costs, but don't spend any money? Sure, let's jump right in. About 5 years ago, I found myself as a second shift supervisor at a small manufacturing plant. We had a line of 8 machines with 4 others that could be added to the end of the line with a series of pipes and blowers. It all started when my boss, plant manager, said, "I don't really read the report that you send to me at the end of the day." He was trying to get a second, much larger plant running to make our small plant redundant and increase our capacity by around 8-fold, so he decided to not even be involved with the small plant. Okay, cool. Well, the company wasn't doing too hot. We had a ton of demand, but the orders were so large that we just didn't have the capacity to fill them. I, along with about 5 other people, worked 8 weeks straight from the beginning of July to the end of August with only 2 days off during that 8 weeks. And as salaried employees at $30,000 a year and not eligible for OT, I was not a happy camper. With the plant running around the clock, a lot of preventative maintenance was being neglected. I went to the plant manager and said, "Hey, if we don't shut down for a day or two and replace the bearings and the rollers in the 6th machine in the line, they're going to freeze up and the motor that turns those rollers is going to burn up." He said, "Just fix it, but don't spend any money." So at the end of the night, I put in my daily report that if the motor burned up, I would ask maintenance to pull an identical motor from one of the machines that were not connected to the current line configuration. And that way, we could finish this order, and to please respond if he wanted to do something different, and CC'd the head of maintenance on the email. I never heard back from him, so after about a week, the bearings froze up and the motor quit working. I put my request into maintenance, and they pulled the motor of the machine not being used and replaced it to finish a major order. The day we were finishing the major order that we had been working on for months, the plant manager walks up to me and the head of maintenance and says, "You all need to hook those extra 4 machines up and start on the next order as soon as we get this one out the door." Maintenance head and I look at each other, then back at him, and I said, "Sorry, we can't do that. We don't have a motor to run the last machine. I sent you an email about it a few weeks ago, and you never replied that you wanted to do something different. It is probably around $10,000 for another motor, and we can hook it up tomorrow if you overnight it." Well, plant manager blew a major gasket because we all knew the company was on its last legs. 4 days later, the CEO called a mandatory meeting at 4 o'clock on the last day of the pay period and let the entire staff go. I got unemployment and took it easy for a few months before starting my MBA and getting into data analytics. So the plant manager, the person in charge of running that plant and making sure everything is as efficient as possible, told you to fix it but don't spend any money. I think I can see why the company might have gone under. Also on this one, I'm not sure of the statute of limitations, but in a lot of places, salaried employees are still eligible for OT as long as they haven't signed a paper saying they're exempt. So that's something to think about. You could probably still get paid for that OT if the company isn't long gone. This next story comes to us from Long Bong. Automated my useless boss out of her job. Let's jump right in. This happened a few years ago. I was a data and reporting analyst and did all the ad hoc reports for the company. My boss, we'll call her Carrie, was useless. She was one of these people that was always late, left early, and took days off at short notice. The only thing of value she did was all the regular reports, sales, revenue, etc. We suspected she got away with it because she was having an affair with her boss. We'll call him Stuart. Our CEO was a fairly decent bloke. He'd look for ways to cut costs and would pay regular bonuses for the best cost-saving initiatives. Carrie was very keen to submit ideas and encouraged us all to automate our tasks so she could try and take the credit for the savings. On one of her Skype days, which coincidentally Stuart was sick as well, the CEO was desperate for the sales report my boss does. I said I'd give it a look and see if I could get it done. Normally, she'd spend 2 to 3 days doing it each week, but the CEO wanted it that afternoon. A quick inspection of the data showed it would be quite easy to automate, So I knocked up the necessary script and got it over to the CEO, who was super impressed that not only had I got it done in a couple of hours, but also that it could be updated whenever he needed it. He asked if I could also look at the revenue, churn, and a couple of other reports. Over that afternoon, I automated everything my boss did. Both Carrie and Stuart were back in the next day, but were immediately summoned to the CEO's office before being suspended and sent home. Turns out, the CEO knew they were having an affair, and all the times they were sick or late or had to leave early was so they could sneak off and go at each other. He'd not done anything about it because of how important these reports were. Now, they were automated. He was able to get them suspended and later fired for gross misconduct for all the time they'd taken off. I also got a nice bonus out of it. I think there's a lot of old school workers in a lot of businesses out there that don't realize how easily they could be replaced by automation. I mean, you can learn how to code by watching YouTube videos these days. My 9-year-old could probably write a script that could put somebody out of a job. That's just the way things are going these days. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.